everyone, Tara back again. Today that I'm speaking with Anne, and Anne works in the realm of grief. Hi, Anne. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, you're so welcome, Tara. I feel honored that you reached out.
Oh,
Hi.
thank you. So do you want to just tell everybody a little bit about who you are and what you do?
I am a grief coach, and I've been supporting people grieving the loss of a loved one now for about 5 years. I'm also an author of a book called Grief's Abyss, Finding Your Pathway to Peace. And I've got several online programs that I work with my clients with, taking them through their own personal journey of grief.
Okay. So that's interesting. I didn't know all of that. Yeah. So one thing that I do want to kind of chat about before we jump into the other topic that we just talked about was what is the difference between a grief coach and, like, say, therapy, just so we're clear on what that is.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you for asking. I get a lot of people wondering this. Grief coaching is a specialty coaching. We deal mainly with the grief and loss that somebody experiences. It's more present focused and future focused, where therapy tends to deal with the past feelings, the past emotions. The person may not be functioning as well when they see a therapist, whereas when I see somebody, I'm assuming that they are functioning. They've just been taken back a little bit by the enormity of the grief that they're experiencing. And my job is to help them move through it. So it's future focused and not moving into the past. It can also be very quick because we're dealing with the behaviors and the thoughts, helping them to reframe them. Whereas therapy tends to be more on the feelings and the emotions.
Okay, that makes sense.
And it can be, therapy is usually a lot longer. Mm-hmm. You're with a therapist a lot longer. In coaching, it can be as short as 6 weeks, 3 months. People have found their rhythm again, just by having the support of somebody who has experienced and understands what they're going through.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually. Okay. So now that we know that, jumping into, and I've been really excited to have this conversation with you today, actually, because I feel like you, of anybody, could really touch on this subject of, relating grief to COVID-19 and what's happening.
We assume, as a society, that you will grieve when there's a death. Loss of somebody that you love, but it's also the loss of something you held near and dear to you. So we're all experiencing loss of connection. We're all isolating. Many have lost jobs. Many have lost their freedom.
Yeah,
we took that so for granted. I'm going here, I can get on a plane, I'm going to visit my children wherever they are in the world. But now we're stuck at home, so we're restricted. It's also taken that sense of control. We no longer have the familiar routines. We would get up in the morning, we would head out, take the same route, we would get to work, we would go through a routine to get ourselves into our day. We don't have those anymore. All of a sudden, you've got families at home 7 days a week. I mean, people experiencing this when they're retiring, and you've got the couple both in the same space. It takes an adjustment. So all of a sudden, the whole world has been thrown into this. So it's sort of a loss of autonomy, a loss of control, because we can't control any of this.
Yeah.
And when we don't have the familiar to help us feel secure and safe, then we're going to go into the anxiety, into the fear. A lot of people who don't have a job, yes, they're able to get certain amounts from the government, which is wonderful, but it may not be enough to keep their household. So they're going to go into financial anxiety and worry and increase their stress levels. When you're in those increased stress levels, I call it the amygdala has been hijacked, that ancient part of our brains, and we can no longer think straight. So there's a whole scientific piece that we won't go into that today. Just say that you aren't able to access that part of your brain that has the clear focus, the decision-making part. So when you're in that high anxiety, you may be making decisions that aren't quite as stellar as they once were. All this as classic signs of what somebody goes through when they're experiencing the loss of a loved one.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It is. It does make sense. So what are some things that people could be feeling or experiencing or that would be classified as part of the grief?
A lot of people who may be, it goes down, I think, as well to being the type of personality. If you're an introvert, this is a wonderful time to be an introvert. You're quite happy. You can isolate and amuse yourselves. Extrovert people need to be outside. They need to be with other people. So because you're not having that, there is that feeling of isolation, that feeling of loneliness, which people who are going through a death feel. They go through that loneliness, and that creates a sadness, and the sadness can deepen. You might find yourself happy one moment and feeling really down and sad the next. And these are all classic grief symptoms. We're all going through the grief right now, and it can be the sadness, it can be anger. Look at the amount of people who were getting quite vicious if they couldn't get toilet paper.
Yeah.
When you're in pain, it's easy to lash out at people. So people are stressed, anger can come out, classic symptom. It helps us feel in control to a certain degree. You're doing something.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So regardless of whether you are introvert or extrovert, or, you know, if, because I know that a lot of people tend to compare themselves and their situations, right? So they'll say, you know, oh, well, we're not as bad off as our neighbor, or, you know, like whatever the situation might be. But I think it's important for everyone to know that as a collective, everyone is experiencing some sort of grief given this current situation.
Absolutely. And I think rather than comparing, this is an opportunity for us to all get into our hearts and have compassion. And what can we do in that moment? And it might be to support and buy things from our local stores. It might be to reach out to an elderly neighbor. Gratitude. If you can actually be a buffer to help you sort of stay in a more positive frame of mind. If you can go to bed with 5 things on your mind, what you're grateful for, and even part of your routine in the morning, if you can start a gratitude journal. And these are some of the things that people, you no longer have a routine, but if you can begin to build your own routine for yourself, so you don't stay in your pajamas all day.
Right.
You set certain time frames and keep things as regular for meals and going to bed and getting up as you can. These are all things that we can control. So instead of looking externally at a lot of the world we don't have control over, and looking to see some of the things that we can control within our own world, that can help to sort of balance the two.
Right. That
Oh,
makes sense, because a lot of people would be looking into what they can control, right? Because there's so much that is out of our control currently. So looking at what they can control, I can see how that would be also an outlet for people to resort to.
mm-hmm. And also it's and also a way of helping them feel safe, because
Yeah.
when we've got a familiar routine, it's the familiar that helps us remain safe. The Serenity Prayer. This
Mm-hmm.
is a time to practice it.
Mm-hmm.
God grant me the wisdom to see the things I can change, and the wisdom to know the things that I can't change, and to accept the difference.
Yeah. Yeah. So because I also think too, it's important to touch base that, and you've raised a good point that not only have people lost, their freedom of choice, right? Of choosing where to go, when to go, how to go, with who to go with, all of that kind of stuff, right? And the loss of jobs and the changes of circumstances. But there's also a lot of things that people weren't anticipating you missing out on, like there's been weddings that have been canceled, big events that people look forward to every year that are not happening.
Mm-hmm.
Even things simply as like the birth of a child has changed, right? In the sense of like, in some places partners aren't allowed to go in. Some places you're only allowed to have one person. So like there's things that you had an idea of what it was going to be like, or an idea of how you wanted it to happen, and now because of what is happening with COVID-19, people aren't able to have it that way.
Yeah,
And
you're
so
right.
it's recognizing that can also be part of the grief as well.
Oh, absolutely, because this is something, it's all part of your hopes and dreams, isn't it? So when it's not going to happen, it is a huge loss to you. And how do you deal with it? We recently had a new grandson. We got to hold him once. So I guess we're very fortunate. But now we can watch this child grow up via Zoom. So
Yeah.
that to us is a loss, because we're not part of that child's life. There's whole reams of university students that aren't even going to have their grad day or
Yeah.
their proms, brides even, who have worked so hard to perfect the wedding of their dreams.
Yeah.
All those are being cancelled. The couple that has chosen a wonderful round the world trip as a retirement gift isn't going to happen. So it's our expectations that we've put out there, and when that doesn't happen, is going to create a feeling of loss. It's a change, and whenever there is a change, good or bad, there can be grief towards it as well.
Okay. Yeah. And I think, like you said, society does recognize grief more so associated with the actual loss of a loved one.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to recategorize grief as more of an emotion that is a lot more common than we think it is.
Absolutely. When you think about it, in your area of expertise, divorce, if somebody gets divorced, what do friends say? Oh, you can get another wife, you can get another husband. Oh, he was no good, she was no good. It's almost like what they experienced didn't matter. It's been relegated to something very trivial.
Yeah.
It's like a pet when it dies. that might have been somebody's child.
Yeah.
We can never underestimate the attachment somebody has to any of these. A woman that doesn't bring a child full term, or the baby dies shortly after birth. I mean, ouch. How heartbreaking is that? But does society recognize it? Oh, you're young enough. You can have another child. You can go out and buy another dog.
Yeah.
That's not the point. It's that a moment. It was that person, that pet,
Yeah.
that wife, that husband, the hopes and expectations you had for a life together is no longer there. And there's grief. So I'm hoping that society, it's death averse anyway, will perhaps be a little bit more aware and a little bit more compassionate, especially in the workplace, where people are going to be returning to work and any one of these things can have happened. I hope they're going to be gentle with one another, because we've all gone through a grief of some sort. There's been a huge loss to society.
Yeah. 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 And that's very true. And that makes a lot of sense. So knowing that now, is there a way that people can heal their grief through this process?
Yes, they can be gentle with themselves. Stop shoulds, coulds, what ifs on themselves. Those are not helpful. Just know you're doing the best you can with the information that you have. If you're feeling sad, lonely, isolated, reach out to a friend, family member, somebody like myself, therapist. You don't have to do it alone. There are a number of things that you can do to help yourself through the grief, and that's just to honor and acknowledge what it is you're feeling, and don't discount it. Don't wake up in the morning and feel, oh, I just want to stay in my PJs. I don't have any energy.
Yeah.
Do that. It's okay. Give yourself permission. Just for a little while. If you're doing it for the whole week, then you may need to rethink that strategy. But relax. The things that you think has to happen. Our emotions are there as signposts. They can help us. They determine. If we were not in this situation and you had the time to pay attention to what it was you were feeling, you would probably go through the gamut of these emotions in a single day. They are just now more noticeable. They're needing our attention because of what we're experiencing. So now is the opportunity to, where am I feeling that anxiety? Where am I feeling that anger? And if you sit with it and just breathe, acknowledge it, breathe with it, it'll dissipate. It will go, rather than getting all agitated and worried about what it is you're feeling, and start looking for something to distract yourself on your phone, or you can become very agitated. Stop and breathe. And I love that the medical community are all practicing mindfulness, breathing exercises, meditation, yoga. They're all advocating it. And these are all things that your mum and I have known for a long time. These are all activities that you can be doing, getting out in nature.
Yeah.
Leave your cell phone at home and just appreciating what is outside of your door. These are all things that can help bring your body back into balance. Because when you think about it, when you're anxious and unsure, what do? You shallow breathe, don't you?
Yeah.
Well, your brain needs the oxygen your body needs the oxygen. So if you can just stop and pause and deep breathe, whenever you can think about it, it just takes a couple of moments. You're going to settle your nervous system down, and you're going to get out of that amygdala hijack, as I call it.
Mm-hmm. So bringing yourself back to the present and what's real and what's today
Exactly.
versus the hamster wheel of the shoulds, coulds, the future, the past, all of that stuff that starts to happen when we don't honor our emotions and what we're feeling.
Absolutely. We've got the perfect opportunity to play with them, just
Mm-hmm.
discover them.
Mm-hmm. And I think there's a lot of judgment that we place on ourselves or others, because we assume that, we see the people out there who are like, oh, make the best of this time and all of that kind of stuff. And so when we do feel those bouts of not feeling the greatest, or that sadness or the anger or whatever that comes up, we tend to place judgment on ourselves, like, oh, if they're not feeling like this, why am I? And we make ourselves wrong.
Yeah.
And yeah, is that something that you can speak on?
Absolutely. And it all boils down to taking off the happy face mask,
Mm-hmm.
or the Mr. Bunny. I've got
Mm-hmm.
to be happy all the time. Nothing says you have to be happy. In fact, if we were ecstatically happy, we probably would go insane. Our
Yeah.
body needs the balance. You have a good cry, you might feel laughter and joy bubbling up because you've now made room for it. So
Right.
it's to stop the comparing and to allow yourself to be real. Ask your friends, how are you feeling right now? And take the time to listen to them.
Yeah.
Gone are the days where you meet somebody in the street or in the office and they'll say, oh, how are you? And they've gone and you're just about to answer them.
Yeah.
There's no need for that, but take time now to sort of ask the person, how are you really feeling? And be genuinely curious to what
Yeah.
that person, and for the other person then to take that opportunity to sort of say, I'm feeling really crappy. Uh, Thank you for asking. And then the person may say, well, tell me about it. And just the fact that you have shared how crappy you're feeling without going into the story. And that's another thing. We go into these stories. If we don't know something, we're going to make a story up because that's
Yeah.
just how our brains work. So stay out of the stories. If you don't know, it's okay to say you don't know. But attempting to go into the story rather than just saying, this is how I'm feeling, that
Right.
can help a person as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because we do tend to create stories in our minds when we can't necessarily explain something, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's important to
Absolutely.
keep track of yourself doing that as well.
Oh
Because I know
gosh.
for myself, I've caught myself where I'm like, that's not even real. Like, that's not even, and you kind of have to backtrack yourself and stop it in its tracks, or else it will end up either becoming real or taking over
Mm-hmm.
your reality in
Absolutely.
some way.
Absolutely. And especially this day where we're all online, this is something you really need to be aware of. If there's a whole, say, 10 people coming online and the moderator is sort of waving and what have you, and then you arrive and the person didn't see you because perhaps the band on top of the Zoom recording, there was no room for you, may not have seen you. But throughout that meeting, you could have taken it personally and be deciding all kinds of things because we are meaning-making people.
Yeah.
And instead of realizing, oh, they probably just didn't see me, end of story, you've gone into a tailspin. And
Yeah.
it's easy to do when you're stressed, when you're grieving, is to take these slights very, very personally because you're more sensitive, you're more open to all this.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I guess the takeaways are basically that we're all experiencing grief in some way.
Yeah,
And remaining, honoring your feelings is the biggest, I guess, thing that you can do. And
absolutely.
then, practicing gratitude. And is there anything else that you can say? Like, is journaling a good thing? Is like,
Oh, absolutely, Tara.
okay,
Absolutely. Um, Journaling is a way of getting you out of your head and more into your heart. Even attempting, if you're not a journaling person, just writing, this is stupid, I've no idea what I'm doing, blah, 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 blah. Very
mm-hmm,
often that is enough to sort of get you over that writer's block, and you'll be amazed at what might flow out of you. And just allow that stream of consciousness to evolve. So
yeah,
journaling is what I recommend all my clients do. And yeah, just to get you out of your head and into your heart. And
yeah,
breathing
okay,
is the big thing.
yeah, deep breathing.
Oh,
Yeah.
very much so. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for this. I found it very helpful, and I know a lot of people will as well. Are you still offering services given what's going on, or?
Absolutely, Tara. I've always been online. So I haven't had to pivot my
Okay.
business model. I have a couple of Facebook pages if anybody wants. Um, if there are sufficient people requiring support and help in this time, I'm willing to open up a support group just for people to talk about it. So they can reach out to me. My business page is Reconnect from Grief on Facebook.
Okay. And is that the best way for people to reach out if, like, let's say, like there's people who are dealing with grief or are struggling right now, or, because there are people who are losing loved ones as well
Oh,
right
absolutely.
now. So is that the best way to reach you is through your Facebook page?
Oh, no, that was just for people who may be experiencing um, uncertainty and want a little bit more reassurance of what's going on now. If somebody is experiencing the loss of a loved one, then I have a website called understandinggrief.com, and they can
Okay.
find out all about grief coaching and a
Okay.
bit about myself there as well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much again for joining me and doing this.
Oh,
And I'm sure we will touch base again soon.
thank you so much, Tara, for the invite. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.